Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I have returned as Chris Clements.
There you go.
You did such a great job while I was away, Sean.
I don't know about that. But
especially on the fitness stuff.
You like that one?
I listened to that yesterday, and that was fantastic.
All right, well,
it was really good.
I didn't feel that great about it, but we'll do some more of it over time. You know, we're adding, like I said in the podcast, it's faith, freedom, free enterprise, free enterprise,
and fitness. But we're not going to talk about fitness today.
Well, I mean, unless you want to. We got Scot Mussi here from the Arizona Free Enterprise Club. Speaking of free enterprise,
yes,
and fitness fits because they are working to keep our economy fit
and moving and not imploding.
Yeah, you got a lot to work on.
And not the
though,
subject
right?
of whatever Katie Hobbs decides.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Scott, welcome back. We it's been over a year since we've had you, and so it's we feel honored to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me here, having me back.
No, it's great to have you.
Didn't scare you off.
No.
Well, likewise. Right?
No, and congratulations on, I think, what was a great year for your organization, the Arizona Free Enterprise Club. You guys, from a grassroots perspective, really performed well, and I mean, you're keeping Arizona from going off the rails in terms of economic development, in terms of regulatory overreach, become one of the most effective organizations, I think, grassroots organizations in the state.
No, well, thanks, Chris. Yeah, no, it was a pretty wild year. A lot of, there were some downs, but I think way more ups from our perspective on things that we were able to accomplish as an organization. Proud of the growth we've had, helping to not only grow grassroots, but coalition develop here in the state. One of the things that we're really passionate about is this isn't about any one election or one group. That this is a movement. We want to make sure that we have the best state that we can possibly have. We want a state where you're free. We want to keep AZ free, and that's our mentality and mindset. And through that process, now we have, through our grassroots organizations at the club, we have over 13,000 people active. It's growing every day.
That's incredible.
And so we're doing that, and we're willing to get into the big fights and do some of the big issues. And so between it feels like I've filed more lawsuits, or our organization's filed more lawsuits in the last year than I could never thought I would have to be filing. But that's what you're seeing now, and especially the activity in the state. It's a different world than it was even 5 years ago. Yeah. Both on the tactics that are coming at us that we think are destabilizing our state, to the issues. I'd never thought that we'd have to be, some of the things we'd have to be worrying about. I mean, we're looking at this and going, my gosh, they're wanting to ban gas stoves. I mean, it's like, what are we talking about here? We have to pass legislation so people can use, cook up a burrito on their stove. I mean, what is going on here? So it's just crazy to think on kind of how everything's flying, but we're proud of what we've been able to do and what we're able to accomplish, and and we're ready to go and start tackling a lot of new challenges over the next year.
Well, and there will be challenges. I mean, you have dealt with you were involved in some ballot initiatives, successful on some, not so much on others. Others just gave a pass because they were so unconstitutional. That's the dark money one, apropos for this. What is the latest on that particular issue?
Well, we're in court. We're suing over Proposition 211. We always believed what they were trying to do under that measure. It was grossly unconstitutional, a total infringement on our First Amendment rights. Frankly, you can even argue our unreasonable search and seizure rights under what they have done, what they're trying to do under that initiative. So we opposed it, and after the election, met with other groups that were concerned about it as well, and we partnered with the Goldwater Institute, and they're providing the legal muscle on that to be to take it to court, and so we're challenging it. And right now it's in front of a trial court in Superior Court, where we have a motion for a preliminary injunction. We're hopeful that we're successful in that, and not just because we think we're going to prevail and we want to put this to stop, but the reality is how they drafted this initiative. It's so destructive that it's impacting groups today on how they behave, because it's so far-reaching, so broad. Right. That how it's drafted, they basically have said if you mention candidates' names within 60 days of an election, you mention a ballot measure, you do something, for example, you say something negative about a candidate. Forget doing a mailer or a television commercial. You put out a candidate scorecard that shows, or a legislative scorecard on how lawmakers are voting. Under the initiative that they put forth, that would count as an expenditure, and you would have to provide an accounting line item sheet to the Clean Elections Commission on where all your money is going and being spent.
That's insane.
And so it goes on and on. And so we're confident we're going to prevail in this lawsuit, but it's going to have to work its way through state court up to the state Supreme Court, likely eventually.
Are there any leaning nonprofit groups that are opposing it?
Currently, we haven't seen anybody on the left file anything in court on our side. It's been interesting to watch this debate related to the ability to freely associate, to be able to support causes and issues without having to go to a government bureau and provide line item lists of all your donors so they can be harassed by people. But up until a couple of years ago, there were groups on the left that were on our side on this issue. They understood the dangers of it. They understood the history, that what comes around goes around. And 60 years ago, it was a lot of left groups that were being targeted by the government to turn over their supporters list, their donors list. But what we have seen is a lot of those groups have either been taken over or they've been, I would say, pushed into silence by a lot of the groups on the left to take a stand on this. And so some of the groups that were on the left that were traditional coalition partners on this issue, from our perspective, seem afraid to even speak up on it now.
Yeah. Well, and so speaking of bad ideas, in addition to what you're fighting there, there's a movement afoot here in Arizona to go to ranked choice voting. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and then why it's a shitty idea?
I thought this is a family-friendly show.
Don't mince words, Sean. Tell us what you really
get worked up sometimes. You know that.
Ranked choice voting, RCV, that's the acronym that's used for it. Right now, and what's going on, and it started out as one of these quirky ideas thought up at think tanks, 30, 40 years ago. In the last 10 years has caught on with some national groups and national donors as an idea to say, hey, we can fix our election system and make it more, make it easier and simpler, and provide a way so that people don't feel pigeonholed having to vote for a Republican or a Democrat, where instead of voting where you pick the person on the ballot that you like best, instead you're going to rank them on your ability of the candidates that you see on the ballot. And that's what's being proposed, and they've been pushing it around the country. And you've seen a lot of cities adopt this, which at the municipal level it may make more sense. I don't think it does make sense, but municipal level where you're talking about a nonpartisan race, and so in some local jurisdictions around the country you've seen it pop up. But now it's being pushed and adopted as a model statewide to say all candidates will be adopted with this idea of you rank your candidates on the ballot. Our perspective, it's a complete disaster. Not only from the perspective of it, the complexity it adds to voting, but also we believe it'll end up disenfranchising voters from being able to vote and elect candidates that they want to elect. And we've seen this happen in real time. And so here in Arizona, we've seen where some of these national groups are trying to come in and trying to sell the idea of saying we should move to a ranked choice model in the state and adopt that. And so we're currently in the process of trying to educate not only lawmakers but voters on what ranked choice voting really means and what it will do. And here are some of the things it will do. One, if you're upset about it right now taking weeks to get election results, well, with ranked choice voting, you're going to wait months.
Yeah. Right.
Because how it works and being able to tabulate and calculate how this works, going through the iterations of people ranking, candidates 1 through 5 or whatever it is on the ballot, it's going to take months to get our election results. And then you have to hope that the election results are correct. There's instances where they have ranked choice voting in some other jurisdictions, one in California, where they held a vote on ranked choice voting, canvassed it, and then found out later that they got the calculation wrong. and they found out the wrong candidate won, and they had to unseat that candidate and seat the rightful person because they couldn't even do it correctly.
But that's just California.
That's just California.
Well, we would do it so much better here, is what they argue.
The challenge.
If you go to their website in Voter Choice Arizona, it's like the who's who of the Democratic Party. In trends for a long time.
The challenge for us here in Arizona for a primary is how long it would take to get the results to then. I mean, we'd have to move our primary significantly earlier in order to be done in time to print ballots for the general. I mean, they couldn't do it under the timeline that we have now.
We don't believe you could. You're absolutely right. I think you would have to completely overhaul not only the timeline, but also how primaries are conducted. You would have to, and again, there's different models for ranked choice voting, but they would likely want to blow up the entire primary system. It'll likely they'll likely like to blend in what's called a jungle primary and put everybody on the ballot all at one time and have people cast their ballots then and then go into the general election. And so they're going to have to go in and likely amend the Constitution, like in multiple areas, to even do what they want to do. And here's another thing as well, too, is that Arizona has a history with this idea of trying to get to what's called a majority or do a runoff election. We implemented a runoff election about 30 years ago. Voters approved a constitutional amendment to allow for runoffs if somebody doesn't get to 50% of the vote. Well, after that was implemented, it went into effect for one election, was hated by voters so much that the legislature re-referred a measure to undo that, to basically say, whoever gets the most votes wins in an election. That was put back on the ballot and was approved 2-1 by voters that next election cycle. So it was already tried, this runoff type election. Voters hated it, and voters went in and undid it in the Constitution 2 years later.
That's how Symington won the first time.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And then there was no runoffs after that?
No.
Because that's when it happened. 92 was the...
This experiment just recently saw the light of day up in Alaska. And is there any movement? The reviews were not exactly, sterling. And I'm wondering, is there any movement up in Alaska to rescind this at this point?
No, and the watching what happened in Alaska was
and it was pushed by Lisa Murkowski, who ended up winning through this scheme of, and she knew that if she could push ranked choice voting, that this could be the outcome.
Yes, and that's what you see with ranked choice voting. You cut this back and you start realizing what's going on, and what you have is actually a small group of people, however well-financed and influential people, that want to, from our perspective, rig the system so that their candidates can win, or keep existing people that they want to keep there. And that's exactly what happened in Alaska. You had a situation where Lisa Murkowski was worried about her next election and wanted to change the system to make it easier for her to potentially win. And so she teamed up with a bunch of groups on the left to push ranked choice voting in Alaska. It ended up passing just barely. It was 50.1%. So a slim majority of voters approved it in Alaska for this last election. Again, they went through that process. There are voters now that are so frustrated that there is an organized effort to, again, put it back in front of the voters in 2 years to repeal it. Yeah. And we expect actually to be on the ballot in 2 years. And we think there's a high likelihood it will be repealed in Alaska.
Imagine that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too, is again, it's
voters don't like it. They're sold a bill of goods, it seems to me. Yeah, that this will fix all the ills that all your frustrations with the system as it is, and just creates more complexity and more frustration.
Yes, and there's a long history nationally of that, but even a long history here in Arizona where there's these groups that form together that go, we don't like how the current system is run for whatever it is. Some of it is we don't like partisanship. Some of it is we want more moderation, whatever the reason is. And they push these measures onto the ballot to say this is going to fix our system and it will make it better, whether it be campaign finance and limiting contributions, whether it be this Prop 211 that was just done, whether it be clean elections, we're going to use public finance money, and we do that, and every time they do this, it either doesn't accomplish what they want to accomplish, or it makes things worse, or it creates new problems that they didn't anticipate. And that's what you see with ranked choice voting, and even in other jurisdictions, what you're describing. it's been rolled back in various cities, some of them very heavily Democrat cities, because it goes into effect and they realize, wow, this is really complicated. Voters don't like this. It's confusing. Oh, by the way, it disenfranchises voters because it creates, not only do people get confused and don't know how to fill out their ballot correctly, so their votes get discarded, but also results in what's called ballot exhaustion. And it's a phenomenon exclusively to ranked choice voting, which what happens is as they start calculating, as people are ranking their candidates, that as they disqualify the low-end candidates and they finally get to the person that wins the race, that person that ends up winning, it ends up being only a small minority of the voters that voted in that race that selected that candidate. Because all the other ballots get exhausted and get eliminated. And so, Chris, if you don't pick the right people to rank, your vote gets discarded, and a small minority get picking the final person that wins. We don't believe a system that creates an environment where a small minority is selecting the candidate is a good election system.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you talk about elitist. It's kind of the definition of it, right? And to your point, Chris, it is an interesting mix of people who are part of this, because you have people like Heather Carter and Roberta Voss, who are former Republican legislators.
Sure.
But then you got Sam Coppersmith and Art Babbitt. Remember him from Flagstaff?
Well, and you have Bo Lane, who ran for Secretary of State. He's supporting this as well. You have Bert Lopez, businessman in Tucson, who both Democrat and Republican at different times were supporting this. It's kind of a who's who of the Tucson Democratic establishment who's really behind this, which is interesting.
So it's more of a Tucson-based.
I don't think it's more of a Tucson-based, but when you look at who's supporting this next go-around and who's really behind it, I mean, I looked at the list and I wasn't really surprised, but it was a lot of people from my hometown.
A lot of the juice is from Tucson. The other key constituency is going to be outside groups, some national groups that want to come in and help fund it. What you'll see is it'll be an eclectic group, usually people on the far left, and then what I'll call the disgruntled angry birds of the Republican Party or ex-Republican Party that's upset that their candidates aren't getting selected to be nominees. Which,
I believe these are the same people who are advocating for open primaries as well.
Yeah,
is that fair assessment?
I would think it's a fair assessment. We would contend we already kind of have open primaries. An independent can vote in any election they want, and
But a Democrat can't vote in a Republican primary.
As it should be.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
The Democrats should be able to select their nominees, Republicans, Libertarians, even an independent. I mean, people talk about independents and the system that we have. Independents actually have one built-in advantage. They don't have to go through a primary. If you go out and get your signatures, you automatically can go to the general election ballot as an independent in the state of Arizona. So anybody that believes, we don't have enough choices for a general election, will support an independent, help collect their signatures, get them on the ballot, and they can be on the ballot in the general election and skip an entire primary.
If Sinema decides to run for re-election, we're going to see that case study front and center.
For sure.
Because and she's got plenty of time, because the deadline for putting those signatures up is probably July, right? It's at the same time as the ballot initiative signatures.
Yes, and so circling back, from our perspective, a lot of that, any of the kind of those disgruntled individuals that are mad Republicans or ex-Republicans, they're upset that they're not getting their nominees. Our response to that is do a better job, sell your ideas. You have to go and sell your ideas. Not every candidate that we like as an organization wins in the primary. A lot of the candidates we end up losing, and that's how it works. It's that there's an arena to sell your ideas, and the solution isn't completely overhauling and ruining our election process because you're upset in one cycle that you didn't get the people that you liked in the primary.
Right.
There's been plenty of primaries where all the candidates we didn't like, but guess what? We need to do a better job of selling our ideas and convincing and winning people over to the next time around. That should be the approach.
Well, this type of issue, this ranked choice voting or the jungle primary. I mean, this is the response to just what you said, not being able to win with ideas. So they have to try to change the process and win through process rather than through ideas. And that's not the way this constitutional republic works.
Yeah, and rigging a process, if you think that's going to be the solution to the ills, if you want to see voter sentiment be more frustrated and stifled, set up a process that makes it feel like it's rigged against them.
Yeah.
And there's
where
very
the
little
minority is, where candidates are being elected with minority votes, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this, it seems to me, and I've heard this through different channels, is a reaction to this idea that, oh, the MAGA Republicans are running the table with the elections. But what we saw in this last election, when they get to the general, that's not necessarily the case. We had some pretty balanced results here in the state of Arizona. You had Republicans like Tom Horn and Kimberly Yee win. And you had Democrats like our governor also win by only 17,000 votes. So, I mean, because of mistakes or the inability to sell their ideas down the stretch.
You have to go and sell your ideas and win voters over, and that goes from cycle to cycle, and it cuts both ways. And the idea that, again, changing the process because you don't like the type of candidates. We went through a little bit of this about 12 years ago when it came to the Tea Party candidates. People were upset about Tea Party candidates. You just have to go out, and if you think that their ideas are not good, then you have to go and talk to the voters and try to change their mind. And that's the dirty secret, is they don't like those people very much.
They don't like voters.
They don't like the
them.
people.
And there's a little bit of contempt toward those individuals.
That is a great point. Thank you for making that point, because
Can we just go buy television commercials and just buy our way out of this problem? It's a very arrogant attitude.
We don't want to go and really talk to the people and be with the people and understand what their ideas are. Or we don't want to go talk to those who might, independents who might not agree with us on everything to win them over to what our ideas are. We're just going to stay in our little bubble and hope for the best.
The irony of it is that the same people that are behind ranked choice voting complaining that each side has a bubble, an echo chamber that they operate in, they themselves are operating in their own echo chamber.
Yeah.
And are even more insular and less interested in going out and talking to people or talking to groups than the other two elements that are out there.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting to see that. So will they do a ballot? Is their plan to put something on the ballot?
From what we can gather, they have to go to the ballot because any movement related to ranked choice voting will require a constitutional amendment. Because as I talked about before, the Constitution requires that, stipulates that the person who gets the most votes wins. So they'll likely have to amend the Constitution. And again, but what you described before, they'll have to probably amend timelines and amend the entire process, probably eliminate partisan primaries, probably establish runoff components and what they're going to do. They'll have to do a complete overhaul of our Constitution to make this work.
Jeez.
It's going to create a big mess.
Yeah.
Well, and it's part of what I would view. I mean, you've got groups like No Labels. You've got what they call Fair Vote. That's the national kind of umbrella of the ranked choice voting folks. I feel like this has been kind of out there on the periphery for a few years. It started when they were trying to get open primaries, which the counter on that was they put something on the ballot and then the legislature referred the ability for independents to pick which primary they voted in, right? We went from closed primaries to partially open by allowing independents to, but and I feel like this is the same crowd that is big on the no dark money, type. They want huge restrictions on campaign finance issues. So if you view it from the prism of freedom versus not freedom, they're definitely on the not freedom side because they want to take away choices. They want to take away freedoms. They want to restrict the First Amendment. I mean, to me, it is the opposite of what the left would claim is, this is an assault on democracy. This is an assault on democracy.
I would absolutely agree with that, and I think this is a dynamic of even when you talk about free, not free, I think this is also a dynamic of a group of people that believe that they know how to run things better than everybody else. So I don't know what the best word to describe that is. I usually call that the ruling elite.
Yeah.
That's what I think they are. They think they know how to do things better, and that we'd be better off in a system where a small group of people can just decide what's going on. And if we have to change the process to ensure and perpetuate that system, if we can have unelected bureaucrats provide an assist to us, that's the system that is preferential for the citizens here in Arizona, rather than one that's you actually have to go sell ideas to people.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. This is not good. And we appreciate that you're leading the charge of educating people about why this is a bad idea.
Yeah, the first step will be education, because most people don't even know what this is and never even heard of it. And that's why the other side now is out there. They're trying to run mini campaigns around the state to try to get people on board, educate them on their side and why they think it's a good idea. And it's interesting to watch, because the first thing they lead with is, this is really simple, which tells me that they have did ample amount of probably polling and focus grouping and have discovered the biggest weakness they have is that this is anything but simple.
Yeah.
So when the first thing they talk about how simple it is, it means it's the exact opposite. It's very complicated and confusing, which is what it is.
Well, it seems like you have two groups, one, advocating open primaries, one advocating ranked choice voting, but they will combine at some point.
I think so.
There's a group called Save Democracy, and that's the group I was thinking of with regard to the who's who of the Tucson Democratic Party. People like Sarah Smallhouse and Cy Shore and, oh my goodness, and Don Budinger and Patrick DeConcini, and I'm just reading down the list. Fred Duvall, and these are all good people. I mean, they're good-natured people, but this is a misguided idea.
Yeah, and one other thing too is that if you look at where it's getting pushed as well, if you notice, they don't push this in heavily blue states.
Right.
You never see this idea. If, like in California, this idea was talked about. Well, guess what? Guess who opposes it? Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
He leads the charge in opposing this. The Democrat Party in California is opposed to this. Heck no to ranked choice voting. Do you think these groups are trying to go into California and take it there? No.
No.
They want to go into red. They want to go into red states or purplish states and implement this because they think it's better if they can, from their perspective, they can neuter Arizona, pick off a few other red states, then they can develop the dynamic they want, which is congressional and Senate majorities that are governed by hard blue Democrats and neutered purple and red states.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well,
Sean, your buddy Chuck Coughlin's involved in this.
Why am I not surprised? Why am I not surprised?
But then there's guys like Mike Hammond and Edmund Marquez, and I mean, these are people I've known for years and years. And again, they're good people. They're good-natured people. I think they've been sold a bill of goods.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe they're going to be passionate about it. But
and maybe we should have some of these guys on.
Yeah, why not?
Just let them tell their piece, and we can explain, and we can push back. Now that we've got Scott arming us with good information.
Interestingly enough, I have Scott speaking to a group here in the next month where it will be a point counterpoint.
Oh, sweet.
On this very issue.
Maybe we should record that.
Nah, can't record it.
Oh, you can't record it. Okay.
But they were just going to have the other side on, and I won't say what group it is, but they were just going to have the other side on. I rose my hand and I said, nope, you need to have both sides.
Good.
Because then our members are not well served.
Well, and Scott, as we wrap this up, I just wanted to thank you for seeming to always be at the front end of the defense of freedom, and the amount of work that you have to put into this. You've always, I mean, it's good to have smart people like Scott. Scott is very similar to Phil Kerpen. We've had him on, from American Commitment.
Yeah.
Who's just the smartest person in D.C. And Scott's the smartest person in Phoenix, in Arizona, on policy stuff that is just critical, and can explain it in a way that people are like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because some of this policy stuff can be very complicated.
How long has your organization been around?
The Free Enterprise Club was formed back in 2005. I've been running it now for 10 years. I took it over in 2013. So it's been interesting as, kind of watching the dynamics of the state change, but also how we as an organization had to respond to that. And so the last several years, we've been growing pretty rapidly, as I talked about before. And diving in not only into different issues that I never imagined that we would have to go diving into, but also dealing with other challenges that didn't exist, and stuff like going out and seeing how on an issue like ranked choice voting, where national money just pours in and they're organizing these local groups, and somebody has to go out there and be able to tell the other side of the story. And so that's what we're doing. And it isn't just our organization. We're going to partner with other groups too here in the state, local groups, not these bought and paid for national outfits that you see from the left, that we're going to go out there and we're going to be able to provide alternative information. Go out there and can challenge these groups when they're holding events, like the one you're talking about that you're having, Chris. There's other ones like that as well too out there that are only hearing one side of the story, and they need to hear that there's other facts associated with some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks so much for what you're doing.
I'm sure that we'll have you back.
It's been so great to see the growth of this organization too, because I knew some of the founders, and it until Scott came around, it was just kind of treading water, and now it's just taking off.
It's on steroids now.
Yeah,
so
good for sure.
No, thank you for having me on.
We won't wait a year again before we have you back. So, thanks again.
Enjoy your time down at the legislature in the meantime, challenging everything that Katie Hobbs comes up with.
I don't know about enjoyment.
What we'll do is we'll bring you back after the session is over, and we can have you recap all of the fun stuff you've had to deal with down there. It's too early to go into that now, but
would love to do that, and
we'll see if we ever get to a budget.
Well, we'll see. Might be July.
Might be July. That's what
you guys will have to do your daily government shutdown watch.
Right.
Here we are, day 25.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks again, Scott, for being here.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for listening. God bless.
Everybody.